Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
I've made mention and shared previous real side experiences in regards to the presence of extensive positions in multi-dimensional creation for the purposes of continuous real education and real reference providing that the awareness process for all those present is better facilitated. These positions would take the visual form of schooling or college-like campuses, identified and referred to as the real universities, and where guides and other entrusted aware beings assume the roles as real educators. And due to the sheer volume of individuals of varying body types and species throughout creation that are at this moment setting intent with the all-is and its eventual recognition, so necessary is it for these universities to be extensive, to be continually expanding in size and in the number of them that are in operation. There are many variations with the universities, as I have chronicled over the years, although all serve ultimately the same function, including the emergence of what I have termed real side ranches, as a number of these are a perfect reflection of the Mexican physical level ranch. These ranches, just like the universities, are in constant states of expansion also, and their volume is ever increasing, again to cater for the tremendous creational wake-up currently taking place. And just like the real side universities, the ranches afford accommodation for those in attendance if they so choose, the option of a permanent residence, or more a temporary and intermittent posting in accordance with each individual's choice. For indeed, all of these real all-is reference pertaining education positions present as varying degrees of safe haven. The universities are by special invite only. They will not even be accessible for those of an ill-intended, insincere nature, as though placed in a particular dimensional region aside from the overall simulator. The ranches, on the other hand, and certain of the other similar colleges and schooling centres will potentially be able to be breached and invaded, as they feature within the confines of a simulator that all within creation can not only perceive but attempt to access, and where necessary is it for security to be exacted. Generally, the real guides will operate as repellents of all beings ill-intended, but oftentimes will other aware beings step into the role also. In this real side experience, I would find myself on another version of the ranch, though appearance-wise it barely resembled the physical level Mexican counterpart. This particular ranch and position was extensive, and incorporated many areas that presented as ranch-like in their style and design. Overall, it was an ever-growing, real-side community of beings on their respective processes of awareness, accommodation available then, and where the sharing and presenting of the real education was a constant. Virtually every time I happen to visit such universities or ranches on the real side, invariably DUANE will always be present in some capacity, multi-dimensional as he and we all are, as the intent he has established reverberates throughout creation and through his various body vehicles and aspects, reflecting then as he being omnipresent wherever creational positions are established that make sense with and support all life. This particular ranch community would be no different, that as I was seemingly visiting, so impressions would reveal, most, if not all, of the earth-based human new friends were present, and visually I would encounter DUANE, Ava, and Jeremy. I would join these three as they were laying on their backs, as though relaxing beneath what was a star-littered sky. As DUANE has revealed, symbolically, such a position of laying on one's back represents being grounded in creation, but not absorbed or immersed with it, as would demonstrably be the case were one to be laying on the ground face down. To be face upwards, so the individual has their focus and attention beyond and aside from creation. The all-is generally represented by the sky in our real side experiences. Creation, more that which is beneath the ground, or very often the surface of the sea. DUANE would be speaking of establishing a key position also in the UK, interestingly, specifically the upper section of the island, Scotland, to be precise. But that due to the likeliness of dark force interference or infringement, as this position was deemed essential, and the controllers would be loath to allow anything of a real nature to feature there, necessary would it be for security measures to be implemented along the lines of how the real guides and other aware beings ensure the safety of certain of the real side ranches and colleges that are accessible to all in the simulator. Very likely this was a real side position version of the physical level intended location of Scotland, as every idea that affects as the physical layout is a multi-dimensional, just as we have our physical body vehicles, but our other dimensional four bodies additionally. For it is a standard to be shown events occurring on the real side within the scenes and cities of the planet Earth, but prior to they filtering through and becoming as a physical level manifest. In essence, the idea is the same, but is somewhat delayed from being actualized on the physical due to the inclusion of additional consciousness restrictions, such as time and space, limitations that don't exist on the real side, where every created idea and agreement is immediately its effect. Ava would suggest that Jeremy and myself assume the post of security in what very likely was the real side Scotland position, and I have shared a previous real side experiences where I would take on the role as additional security on one of the ranches along with the guides, etc. For as everything featuring on the physical stems in essence from the real side, though delayed, as I mentioned, that which occurs within the other dimensional versions will impact then the physical counterpart accordingly. As I said, it is the same idea being effected ultimately. And from the real side, so can the ideas that are physical be altered, rearranged, enhanced, etc., and whatever operation DUANE was set to undertake in Scotland would have a bearing on the physical level position that, as I said, the dark forces were aware of and intended to prevent, hence the need for real side security. I would accept and be agreeable to the post, although nothing would be revealed as to the specifics regarding DUANE's real side Scotland endeavour. This extensive ranch community was one potentially accessible to all in the simulator. Its population were predominantly human, though undoubtedly there would be other body forms and species present, but of those in residence, it was only the humans that I would see. There was a moment where the ranch community wouldn't be invaded, but be subject to an insidious attack. As I said, a dimensional position that any simulator-based being could glean access to, and very likely the dark forces were making a move in opposition of DUANE's intended Scotland operation. For those stationed within this particular real side ranch community were those to be directly involved, hence why the residents and attendees were overwhelmingly human perhaps, as Scotland is a human Earth-based position. The attack would take the form of a kind of a fire, one which would sweep through the ranches, igniting the foliage and crops. But what had caused it must have been an accelerant of a particular chemical composition that a toxic and lethal smoke would exude from the flames. As I also mentioned, the real side ranches and colleges accessible to all will boast security, and this particular ranch would be no different, for a large military-style unit would make their presence known, rounding up all the community residents and instigate a relocation effort to afford safe haven, either areas of the overall ranch beyond the fire and toxic smoke's reach, or alternative dimensional locations. As efficient as the military security were, they were not absolute in their ability to rescue all ranch residents. A number of them would fall to the toxic smoke and perish. With every individual's experience based on ultimately what they decide, the agreements of consciousness they hold to, so what would befall each resident would in actuality be according to them. The overall consciousness generally has been designed that it is an agreement support to the dark forces and of their power, hence the affected situation of the dark forces having control of the entire simulator, and with the agreement extended ability to harm, torture, and eliminate practically anyone they so choose at any moment they decide. The process of awareness is a releasing of the ideas of consciousness, including then all that are in relation to the dark forces in all their expressions, gradually denying the controllers the ability to be able to exact harm or destruction upon any being undertaking such a process. The awareness becoming individuals on the ranch then would be at varying stages of their respective processes, and the extent of their consciousness idea releasing dictated each resident's ability to survive, what was a dark force-instigated attack. And even with the rescue and intervention efforts into the affairs of others, these can only be possible if the option is made available and is an agreement idea that can be capitalized on. If an individual's manifested movie is absent of the role of a rescuer, then no individual can assume such a position within a said individual's experience. And in the final equation, each resident was choosing to either escape the toxic fumes, fall to them, or to allow the role of a rescuer that the military security could assume and then provide. I would elect to assist with the rescue and relocation effort, though the security team were somewhat stubborn and demanded I relocate like all the others, as opposed to assisting them, as they were adamant that they needed no help and had the matter in hand. Although I also would be subject to the parameters as set by each and every resident in regards to my ability to intervene into their decided affairs, I would ignore the military request and extend my assistance regardless. I would produce a kind of cloak or cape and securing it about my shoulders so I would have the ability to fly, and this was rather advantageous where my rescue efforts were concerned. Among those I successfully relocated, there would be a group of 3 women who refused to move, terrified into immobility like rabbits caught in the lights of an oncoming car. The fire and the toxic smoke were closing in on their position, and I would witness them becoming engulfed in it, and were it not for my interceding, they would surely have been killed. For I would land among them and bundle them into a nearby building, swiftly securing any openings that served as entry points for the smoke, and thus the 3 women would survive. I'm uncertain as to who they were. My personal self had no recognition of them. They were all human. 2 were in their mid-20s, and 1 more middle-aged, I would estimate. In the aftermath, the ranch had endured, though required restoration. Most of the residents had survived. Those that had been relocated to other creational positions were returned as they so decided, and this particular real side awareness community would continue on despite this setback. There was, however, a little squabbling and infighting. Accusations were being circulated that the fire was started by one of the residents, as though there were a dark force agent infiltrator operating within the community. Interestingly, one of the non-human residents would make her presence known. She was a variety of a bipedal, 2-legged wolf, but with an exceptional snout seemingly, for she could determine the possible fire starter and very likely dark force plant by pressing her snout to them, and where she could effectively read, through a kind of particle trail, everywhere they had been and everything they had done and been involved with over the last several days. She failed to sniff out the culprit, as it seems whoever was responsible had long since departed. Ava would be present and rather instrumental in bringing everything to order, as suspicion was running high, and there was much by way of a finger-pointing, etc., even as the wolf woman determined that the guilty party no longer was present. The military security team would remain vigilant and at their post, guarding the ranch community, but a unit of them were set to be dispatched to a remote dimensional position for an assignment or other. Despite they not especially delighted at my decision to assist their rescue and relocation effort from earlier, they did acknowledge my valuable aid and presented me with an option to be recruited into their military outfit, to partake in what would be life and awareness of beneficial operations and assignments. Naturally, I would jump at such an opportunity, and I would be invited to join them for the assignment they currently were launching on a distant planet in a remote dimension of creation. The scene would switch to where I was operating with the military unit on the planet they had targeted as necessary for the execution of their objective. It was a barren and lifeless planet at that, and although the unit had adequate supplies for the duration of their operation, the food had to be rationed carefully. Nothing would be revealed as to the nature of the assignment I was involved with, but at one point a young boy of the age of 10 or so would feature. He seemed somewhat out of place and exuded a menacing sense about him. I've made a mention of the relatively constant influx of what I may describe as a sinister, unearthly, though human in appearance children in real-side experiences of late. Impressions reveal they are anything but what they outwardly appear to be, and which seem to have the singular compulsion and drive to operate destructively, to interfere with the real-side beneficial projects wherever able, etc. This boy seemed to be one of these individuals, and as he engaged with me, he would profess to being hungry. Despite my impressions as to his ill-intended true nature, regardless of his innocent child exterior, I would play along to see where the situation might lead. I took him to one of the military bunkers where the food was kept, and he would proceed to gobble through the supplies, not unlike a horde of locusts. The door would burst open, revealing the military unit leader flanked by 2 soldiers, but all that met their eyes would be the remnants of the food strewn about the floor and myself, as the sinister child had faded from the scene just as the soldiers were entering. As I mentioned, the food was in short supply, and naturally I was accused of the severe depleting of it, for no other individual was present other than myself and the evidence. It seems the sinister child had delighted in setting me up, so to speak, and such an act of extreme food over-indulgence was deemed punishable. I would be marched to a kind of a cubicle and strapped within it, though at that moment I had dissociated my view that I was operating from my real awareness, aside from the simulation position and what was unfolding, objectively viewing my simulated body form inserted into the cubicle. Interestingly, the form I was assuming was that of the actor Lenny James, best known perhaps for his role as Morgan in the Walking Dead zombie series. The punishment comprised of being subjected to fire seemingly, not to the extent of being incinerated or burned to death, but enough that the body, stripped of its clothing, would be severely scalded. The military unit surely were a serious bunch, although entrusted to operate as security on one of the real side ranches and to undertake beneficial assignments, so it was safe to determine as to their overall sincerity and intent to placement, despite the brutish punishment I was about to receive. I was set to go along with the ascribed punishment, but then the skies above would suddenly be filled with a vast and very advanced spacecraft. As they lowered themselves to a position 30 feet or so from the ground, the pilots and occupants of the craft would make themselves apparent. They were an array of humanoid body forms, but with the features and skin colorations that revealed them to be far from human. They pronounced themselves to be gods, and impressions revealed these were beings that had developed themselves, that they were very creationally powerful, in that they had the ability to warp and manipulate the simulation as they saw fit. If they could impose their powers and abilities on others, would be according to agreement, as everything in creation must be, regardless of the might and attributes of another, that such an individual can impose upon my body form and experience, is according to my agreeing with the idea that they can, absent of the idea and no simulation can follow. These self-proclaimed God characters seemed to have impressed the military unit as to their credentials. To be as adept at direct creational manipulation as they were, so must their respective consciousnesses be somewhat devoid of ideas that present then as a limitation. The awareness process does involve a releasing of all ideas of consciousness, as I mentioned earlier, ideas that will present the restrictions that are their nature, and as we proceed with our process, so we become progressively more unlimited, and this will be apparent to all who witness our activities on the real side, as we reach a point where very little is beyond our abilities as afforded via the real awareness in regards to our simulation operating body forms. My real side actions invariably become noticed, and I have shared a number of previous real side experiences where I am approached by other beings, and my services are requested to assist them with that which they cannot do themselves, due to the limitations that their consciousness of ideas held to present as. My progressively limitless real side activities had drawn the attention of these godlike beings that, as I said, had developed themselves, that they were operating in a state of virtual limitlessness also, but not as absolutely as can be the case with the awareness process. As such, they had determined to initiate contact with an invitation for me to join and become as one of them. I have been approached by such characters before, those that identify as gods due to their capabilities, and with the similar offers, though with the previous situations and real side experiences, as impressions revealed the god beings to be ill-intended, so I would always refuse them. In this case, these particular powerful body types, although personal self-immersed, and with no interest in their real awareness or the all-is, were not in any way dark force affiliated or operating destructively. They were simply whiling away the moments, amusing themselves with their practically unlimited powers, but not to the detriment of others refreshingly. Based on my impressions as to they not being destructively inclined, I would agree to join them, to see where this may lead, and was immediately extracted from my fire punishment cubicle, and now on board one of the gods' vast space vessels. The military unit, although not initially aggressively inclined towards the god beings, would however now attack them in light of they liberating myself from my deserved punishment, deserved as according to the unit's leader. But despite the military unit's own advanced weaponry, they were completely ineffective. Their laser fire simply bounced off the now departing ships with no indication of damage whatsoever. The scene would now switch to where I had been transported with the god beings to their own respective dimensional position. I was now operating as an alternative body form, still human, but of a different appearance than my usual human Kevin form, no longer as Lenny James, and sporting an intricately carved wooden cane. What would follow was another relatively common feature of the real side experiences, where other body types having requested my services, or in this case, desiring that I join them, want undeniable proof of the unlimited abilities as made possible via my real awareness that they had witnessed or been made aware of. They would request that I generate a particular energy only made possible by moving through frequencies and dimensions at a rapid pace and through the utilizing additionally of a certain technique or procedure that was rather beyond my personal self to describe, and if successful, I would have approved beyond a shadow of doubt my capabilities and eligibility to join with these curious, self-proclaimed God beings. One of their number would accompany me, as though as a witness throughout, and I would manifest a kind of spherical disc that would incorporate him and myself. Spinning this disc rapidly, though aside from this motion it would remain stationary, so we would be transported at a rapid pace through multiple dimensions, each dimensional scene fading to be replaced by the next, as though flicking through channels on a TV with a remote. I would activate the prerequisite procedure, and the energy the God beings desired me to produce would be generated to their satisfaction, the individual accompanying me and myself now returning to the God beings' dimensional position, the spinning disc evaporating. I was now accepted among them, and as is always the case, every situation presents as opportunity. These beings were very creationally powerful and capable, and so lay the likeliness of my involving them with the real side, life and awareness of beneficial projects, etc. For individuals such as these, with their remarkable skills and developed attributes, can potentially be tremendous assets, and it will be interesting to see what comes of this. That although they had little interest in anything other than the fabricated, simulated lives they had created for themselves, they were intrigued as I presented them with a breakdown of creation, the 5 life levels, the cause and effect nature of creation, and the real universes of the all-is aside from it. And so very possibly they would have the inclination of exploring this further, and perchance embarking on their own awareness and true reality recognizing processes. The scene would switch to where I would re-establish a contact with the military group, that despite what had transpired, it seemed all was rather forgiven. And so I would not only be in association with the God beings as an accepted addition to their number, but also retained as part of the military unit, that I may participate in future assignments and operations with them. I'm all for real side multitasking, and there the experience would conclude.